So let's just jump into this. How'd you first get into music in general?
As a kid, I was always kind of very aware of music in the background, like what like thing when things were playing, I tended to listen and still do like listen more to like the lyrics and the music than a lot of people around me. You know, for some people it's just like kind of like wallpaper and they never look at it. Whereas to me, I'm like walking in and looking at that wallpaper and go like, oh, that's an interesting design. And so just as soon as the music plays, I'm like captivated and like, what's this song about? And why did they write this? And even as a little kid, I was that way. And like I remember having a little tiny AM radio that I took to school with me when I was in like fourth grade. And during recess, I was like listening to stuff. And it actually worked out well because a bunch of little girls were chasing me because they wanted to hear Michael Jackson. And I appreciated having the attention, because I was very interested in romance at that age. And so I always just played Michael Jackson, and then they would like literally chase me and be like running. Once in a while I might let them catch me, but yeah, that's how it started.
And you've been
Should I
searching
end
for
it there,
that.
or you want to hear more? I can like tell you like so well like to lead to now. So I'm a sound engineer for high level concerts. Like I was Prince's sound engineer in 2006, 2007. Like sometimes high level and sometimes low level. Locally, I'm actually working well for a couple weeks. I'm about to go out on tour with a band from Japan called Man with a Mission, who wear wolf heads, and they sing the theme song for Demon Slayer. They're an awesome, amazing band. And but right now, while I'm in town, I'm doing sound for a bar where a woman that owns the bar has been doing this for 30 years, and it's completely genius. She has a big cauldron of sex toys on stage, and it's a college town. So basically, she says whoever screams the loudest gets this dildo or whatever. So people come in for free and get like dollar shots or whatever, and she's singing cover songs, just rocking, like she's a rock vocalist and like, but rock versions of all these cover songs and screaming like, if you want this, you got to scream. So there's all these college girls like, ah, mostly girls, not all, but and so because of that, the place has just been packed for like decades. Like, isn't that genius? Isn't that genius? Like, she has to spend a few dollars on, I'm sure she gets a discount on a bunch of like vibrators and things like that. And then people are like, of course, I'm going to go in there and get a free vibrator and be cheering. And, people have like their, wedding parties, divorce parties, like whatever at bachelorette, like any kind of celebration in that age range and stuff. She's like, we're going to go to Hump and Hannah's. The place is called Hump and Hannah's in Boise. Like, we're going to go to Hump and Hannah's, free to get in, cheap booze, and this rockin' show, and free gifts.
Marital
Anyhow,
aids.
yeah.
That's hilarious. She probably orders it in bulk off a line. You get it cheaper that way. If you could just go into the
No, no, she
stores.
supports local stores. She
Oh,
supports the local stores, and then they also do they have like ad buy-ins and stuff, and so she gets it at like a huge discount and buys a ton of it, and like from their warehouse or whatever, and gives out all different things. Like some of them are giant, like crazy things just for the display of it. Like no one's really gonna. I mean, I don't know what really happens in the bedroom, but some of it is just like
you want to
giant
assume it's
stuff.
for just display purposes.
Yeah, yeah. So sorry, I like once I start talking about these things, I get so excited. So I know we're gonna try to focus on more of the history of the music and stuff
No,
here, but
no. This is
I,
this is
I
great stuff.
oh,
This is
okay,
great
you're
stuff.
okay with
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So,
while we're early in the interview, then I'm gonna say so on that Man with a Mission tour, that's in Europe, and because they're paying for my flight to Europe, right after that, I do my first ever 10-foot pole solo acoustic European tour. I only had 2 weeks before I had to be home and do sound for Curtis Stigers, the guy who does the theme song for Sons of Anarchy. He's kind of like a jazz pop guy, but he also has this rough song in Sons of Anarchy that broke big. But anyhow, so I have 10 shows in Europe, mostly around Germany, just to try to like quickly like drive around and do solo acoustic shows, and that's in September of 2024.
word,
I'm pretty
word.
excited about that.
But yeah. So off on a tangent that I'm probably going to cut out. Um, sh- I'm glad that she is getting the discount for the advertisement and whatnot because I did work. I actually met my wife. I worked at a adult novelty stop shop here in town, and
Nice.
like I worked there for 4 years and she worked there for 8, right? But the markup on that stuff is so high, like you wouldn't
Yeah,
believe it.
yeah.
Like it was 2 times if it was not electronic and 2.5 if it was electronic.
Yeah, and you can imagine also, I mean, well, I'm sure you know, but I know from the other perspective of like, say somebody is a bit shy, like okay, do am I going to go in a store and have like people looking at me, possibly judging me and like going through like what am I going to get versus do I go to a club and possibly get one for free just by cheering? And like there's no shame, everyone's doing it. You're in a big crowd like versus like in the middle of the day you walk into an empty store, you're the only one in there and they're like, "Can I help you? What are you interested in? You want something that does this, and if it's somebody who's a bit shy, like, it's that's a big like or if you have anxiety or any kind of thing, it's kind of a big barrier to
Barrier. Yep,
doing it.
yep, yep.
Whereas you go to a bar and it's like you might get one for free. Like so you can understand like the genius of that. Like she's a local rock star. Her name's Rocky Johnson. It's called the Rocky Johnson Band. And everybody knows who she is. Well, she also does a lot of philanthropy on the side. Like there's a lot of like supporting the local, hockey team and stuff like that. She's a local celebrity, but from doing this, from being the singer of a cover band, owner of a bar, and having rocking parties where people get free sex toys. Amazing, right?
Yeah, it is genius. That's genius.
Come on, drink. Come on, fuck. Come on, live. Come on, come. Let's get time, man. But I won't.
So let's get into I was reading about the formation of Scared Straight. Was that your first musical project?
That's a funny thing. Yeah, like it was my first and basically my only like it's the same thing. Like I started like talk about monogamy, right? Like in roughly 1990 1982, 83. I'm not sure exactly. I think it was like 82, 83.
This is why
Um,
the citation is needed. Look at
yeah,
this.
well, I don't even know. Yeah, we were talking about on Wikipedia, like, oh, citation needed. Like, I don't even remember exactly. I'd have to like kind of go back and look at a calendar or something, but because I don't remember. I remember I was in like eighth grade, so I'd have to do the math. But anyhow,
It read like an '80s movie. It read like an '80s movie. Is
well,
it
good.
true that you
Well, yeah,
formed a
yeah, it's
band?
totally. Yeah, so I mean, we were just kids at a junior high school, and I was really into music and loved like I just loved the whole idea of music and bands. At those times, there were these kind of like Black Sabbath, like local stonerish bands, and just playing guitar and having a good time. And I saw that, and I'm like, I'd like to do that. And so, and my parents forced me to take piano lessons. I hated it, but then eventually I shifted to guitar. They eventually allowed me to um, go over to guitar, and I was just a kid, but I was still kind of like, oh, I'd like to play that kind of music. I don't want to play classical music or like, I was like, there's no time in my life where I can imagine being on a like in an orchestra and wanting to like, that sort of thing. But I would love to be like Black Sabbath and just like, just rock out and have like really groove based stuff. Like even as a kid, I was thinking that way. So I got a guitar, but I could barely play it. And then and there were these other kids who also had stuff. And Scott Rudinsky was a drummer who lived right by the junior high school. I didn't even know him, but some other guys that I did know were like, "Hey, you should come over and we're going to play in Scott's garage." And they're playing like Message in a Bottle and AC/DC's Live Wire, because it's like one note on the bass, do 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 do. That song is just like the bass just has like one note through maybe the whole song, or even like Running with the Devil, the bass just plays one note. And but that's how it started. It just started as us like just getting together and playing music, and it was so easy. It was right by the junior high school, so rather than take the bus home, we'd all run over to Scott's and play music. And we were also at the time different members of the band had been into it for longer, but for me, it was fairly new. Like the whole punk scene, like Minor Threat and stuff like that. And I was just, um, I'd loved music and especially like rock and metal and stuff like that. But one punk kind of blew my mind because it was about real stuff. Like most rock things, like Van Halen and stuff. Like I love Van Halen, and there were some cool songs like "Running with the Devil," but a lot of it was just about girls and partying and making love, you know. And so then I'm listening to Fear and stuff, and they're talking about being in an insane asylum or like suicidal tendencies. All I wanted was a Pepsi, and and talking about world politics, and they were just, you could sing about anything. You could sing about friendship, like 7 Seconds, that song about trust, like and just great melodies and songs about whatever you wanted to write. So I was in like and so I was totally interested in writing that kind of music because there was the freedom of just, we could say whatever we want to say and write whatever we want to play, and had a lot of energy. And so we eventually, we had different names before we settled on Scared Straight, and we had different players. Like a lot of different people were in playing and doing different things. But that's the same band that eventually became Scared Straight, and we toured around the U.S. and a couple times met. There's a whole bunch of stories, but the long and short of it is Scared Straight. Eventually, we just changed our name to 10 Foot Pole in '93 or so, and I'm still trying to write songs and still singing some of those same songs from back in the day, and still trying to write a good one, really, like trying to trying to make it better.
Word.
Yeah, still trying.
Yeah, you first popped up on Mystic on the Nardcore scene. That Born to Be Wild EP, the 9 tracks, it was 13 minutes of fucking awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
Yeah,
I love that early hardcore fucking driving shit that you were doing back then. And You Drink, You Drive, You Die was a great release as well.
That was a great demo for a record that suddenly was released as a record, essentially. Yeah, the Nardcore compilation was our first actual like recording and release, and it was really weird because Scott Radinsky was the drummer still when we recorded it, and then all of a sudden he kicked out the singer, and he became the singer, supposedly because the singer just didn't show up to the studio on the time to record that. And I was not happy about that, and it was kind of like, what? Like Gary Roca's our singer. What happened? Like, what's going on? And Scott was like, he didn't show up, so I sang it. I was like, what? You just sang it? Like, he didn't show up. Like, why would he not show? Like, anyway, it was a little bit suspicious, but eventually it blew over. And Scott has a nice voice. Like, I was like, well, I actually prefer Scott's voice, but it's just not like ethically right. Like what happened? Like, how did this happen? Why was I not asked? Like, like I'm a band member. Like, why didn't I get a vote? And it was like, oh, it was sudden urgent. He didn't show up, so I sang the song, and now it's released, and now this is our band. And so suddenly he was the singer, and then we made the EP, like you said, the 9-song EP, and we did our first U.S. tour in 1985. And we were opening for Ill Repute. And I'm pretty sure, well, there were two good reasons why Ill Repute invited us. One is my mom had a van. Maybe Scott had convinced them that I'd be able to just borrow her van and take it on tour. And we would all tour together, like Ill Repute and Scared Straight. And the other was that their drummer couldn't do it. So Scott played drums. So Scott was playing drums for Ill Repute and singing for Scared Straight. And Brian Walsby was our drummer, and Walsby's an artist. There's a bunch of long stories about it, but the long and short of it is we got all the way. We played a bunch of great shows and got all the way to well, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, our car got stolen. It wasn't our car, but anyhow, a station wagon got stolen with the trailer, and it had all our gear in it. And then we played one more show in Baltimore with no distortion on my guitar. It sounded like a jazz show, like kind of Minor Threat, like and then things just kind of unraveled. Like some of us wanted to keep going and some wanted to go home. Of course, I wanted to keep going. And then suddenly Brian Walsby got an offer to be the merch person for Corrosion of Conformity, his favorite band of all time. And he was just like, no, that's it. I'm gonna join them on tour and move to North Carolina or South Carolina. I can't remember. And eh, yeah. But anyway, it wasn't enough punishment for me. So I stayed with it for the next whatever. That was 85. In the winter of 85, we went on a tour with No Effects, met No Effects, and they were awful at the time, but they were interesting people that we kept in touch with, and of course then they became legendary and amazing.
Those
And
early albums have some charm to them.
yeah, I mean that was a weird tour. I think the best band on that tour was Entropy, a band called Entropy, and I can't remember who else, but maybe it was the Grimm, but it was like through Texas and stuff. And I remember like the first day of that tour, I blew out all my speakers I had a wireless unit and I didn't know how to use the squelch. And I had, so my dad had a sound company. So I had all this audio gear available. And because it was Scared Straight was kind of more hardcore at the time. So I played with like a tube amp, but then I sent that output into a PA amp, like a 1200 watt amp into these powerful speakers. So when we show up in Texas, I turn my wireless on. And in wireless, there's a squelch decides what level of noise it's going to allow in, like what's going to open the audio or not. And I had the squelch basically wide open. So the second that I turned it on was like 1,200 watts of just noise, and it just blew up all my speakers. So now I always play wired. Even my in-ear monitors, I play wired just because I don't want to deal with wireless. And I've been a wireless monitor engineer for bands like AFI. I toured with for a year and a half, like did 150 shows doing their in-ear wireless. Like I'm a wireless expert essentially, but I don't use wireless because on my show, I don't want to worry about it. I just want to plug it in, change the battery or whatever, but plug it in and it works. So I have a carabiner that I hook to my belt, and my guitar cable and my in-ear monitor cable are both run together and just hooked to that carabiner. Then I don't have to worry. I have to worry about getting tangled up, but I don't have to worry about like, oh, we're in Europe and it's a different frequency range and this one's illegal here. And suddenly we're getting, interference,
Why is it well? Rules for all of us. You're needed by the future. We're giving all the never play together. We are the future together. We're taking over together. We're doing our best together. We are the future.
And I guess if it's somebody else's problem, then yeah, wireless. But if it's your problem,
it could be your problem, even though you don't expect it. I'll give you a quick example. Prince kept firing guitar techs. And so during one show in Las Vegas at the Rio, so I was a sound engineer. And so he calls me at 5 a.m. Denny, why didn't my bass work? He picked up the bass to play a solo and it didn't work. And I had to tell him, well, the new guitar tech that you had saw a little bit of noise on the guitar wireless channel. And so he hit scan, and that started searching for channels. And while he did that, it interrupted your vocal mic. So in the middle of Pink Cashmere, which is a very gentle song where he's going like, ooh, here we go again. Da-da-da-da. All of a sudden it's like, ooh, here we go. And then it stopped. What happened was the guitar tech did a scan on an Audio-Technica wireless unit, and it was a double channel unit. So when he did the scan, it somehow interfered with Prince's vocal mic, which was on a Sennheiser upstage. And then it also changed the bass because the bass was on channel 2. So the guitar tech changed the guitar channel to a clean, but he didn't realize he was interrupting the lead vocal, and 2, he changed the frequency that the bass wireless was expecting to receive, but he didn't change it on the bass guitar that had the transmitter. So when Prince went to play his bass solo in the middle of some song, he picked up a bass and went to like play and nothing. So of course that's why he was calling me at 5 a.m. Denny, why didn't my bass work? He didn't even talk about Pink Cashmere at the time, but I told him that's why Pink Cashmere had that big thing. So that was like, maybe the 13th out of 20 guitar techs that he had in the period that I was with him. I could tell you other stories too, like about the Super Bowl and stuff, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Let's talk about the history of.
That's a fascinating story. That's good stuff.
If people enjoy those stories, that's the kind of thing I do at. I noticed I'm clipping my mic here. If people enjoy those stories, I'm going to turn my vocal down a little bit. that's the kind of thing I do at the solo acoustic shows. Like sometimes I try to like kind of open it up for questions and get people to give people the freedom to, you know, interview me essentially at so because solo acoustic shows are usually pretty small, so it's not a lot of people, and so we make it intimate, and we could have these sort of discussions if you care to talk about those things.
So if you're in Europe while you're going through,
That's what I'm saying. If you're in Europe and you want to hear stories, and then it's coming up in September.
yeah,
I'll save a few good ones for the shows there.
yeah. The good Prince stories are still yet to come. But yeah, that's good stuff. And to miss out on a Prince bass solo is devastating, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a bummer, but to me, the thing in Pink Cashmere was more devastating because it was like, you know, it's all this mood and the lights and everything's good, and he's like, "Oh, here we go." I'm just like, no, and you know, I didn't even know what happened. I didn't know why. Like, I'm just like, oh no, what happened? And it wasn't until I multi-tracked all the shows. So once I got to the multi-tracks, I could see, oh look, here's the point where Prince's mic, you know, gets the hit and the bass guitar disappears. And then I realized, okay, and the guitar also had a change in it. I'm like, okay. And so then I asked the guitar tech, you know, I didn't just throw him under the bus. I asked him, and then of course I had to tell my boss the truth about what happened. Like, you know, I wasn't purposely trying to get him in trouble, but you have to, you know, because otherwise Prince would go on thinking like Denny has no idea what's going on and this stuff's going crazy and there's ghosts. You know, no, it's not a ghost. It's somebody pressed a button that destroyed your vocal mic and your bass, your wireless bass, all in one button.
Word. But that I've
It's
been
his fault for firing all the other guitar techs. I mean, if you have the same guitar tech for a long time, you know, that's one reason why it's good to have steady crew. And if you're always firing people for, you know, various reasons, then there's a risk of somebody not knowing that the Audio Technica does both channels, not just the channel you think it's doing.
word. So but no, I play guitar and bass, and I love any kind of bass solo. So to hear that the audience missed out on a sweet ass fucking Prince bass solo is devastating. I always get excited anytime there's a bass solo. You know, I love me
Really?
some bass. Yeah.
I fall asleep during bass solos. I was a monitor engineer for Return to Forever when they made their triumphant return around 2007, 2008. And Stanley Clark's a bass player, and they would all like take turns playing solos, and it was rough for me to stay awake. Like Chick Corea would play like a, you know, 7 minute piano solo, and then Al Di Meola would solo, and Stanley Clark and Lenny White, like these jazz guys that like people who are into that stuff are, you know, stoked. And I literally had to do push-ups to stay awake. Like I was on the side of the stage doing push-ups. And one time Tom Cruise asked him, "Man, you're sound engineers." So some of them are what's the thing? Scientologists. So they would get these Scientologists like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Tom Cruise, and like, and but the funny one was like, you know, the guy from Mission Impossible was like, "Man, your sound engineer is really intense. Like he was doing push-ups and stuff during the show. Like, you know, that's intense." And really what it was I was trying to stay awake because I didn't want him to be like, "Yeah, your sound engineer fell asleep during your solo."
It's them soothing bass tones just put you out, huh?
Yeah. I'm good at doing sound for things like jazz, but I need like melody. I need a song, like the lyrics. I need a story to keep me awake. If I'm gonna, especially if it's like 2 hour concert, I can't just hear the notes. I need to hear a story. I need Ozzy to tell me about, you know, generals gathered in their masses or whatever. Like what's going to happen? Even Taylor Swift, like it's like stories. I want to hear what's going to happen. What did this guy do that was so awful, or what, you know, what's going on? What's the story about? In jazz, to me, there's no story. It's just like, I bet I can change keys a whole bunch of times, and you know, like you won't be able to tell if this note's in or out of the scale because it's changing all the time, right? Some kind of math. It's like a high level of math that I'm just not interested in.
Oh, and that's that music calls to me on the musical level, that when people are doing that shit, that is the story to me. It's like a musical adventure that they're going on, right?
Yeah. I that's why I'm telling you the story is that those guys, I don't really understand it myself, but at the time there was a little bit of like a bullying of Al Di Meola, and what it ended up being, I was told, I don't really understand, is that the guys like especially Chick and Stanley Clark could understand music at such a high level that they could do these changes of mathematical relationships of music theory, and Al's ear, like he could play stuff over it, but he couldn't keep up with what they were doing musically. I can't, somebody said I can't, like math jazz or something. I can't remember what they called it.
Oh yeah,
But
when you
like,
start
yeah.
adding polyrhythmic things going on where different meter changes are happening, and King
Well, I
Crimson.
think he could keep up with the meters. It was more like key things. It was more like the math of like the key changes. Like
Oh, where
uh,
you the
yeah.
the the
Yeah.
seventh dominant, blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Oh,
they,
the
they were
music
they were
theory stuff.
switching keys and stuff. Yeah, music, it was music theory. Because Al could keep up with the like rhythms and stuff. Like you don't have to know the math. You could kind of feel it as long as you understand it and go with it. Like some people know it by counting, but some people feel it, and that you can fake. But when they're changing keys, like what notes are going to be in the next thing they're doing, I don't think you can fake it. Like because you have to be on their wavelength. Anyway, I don't. It's beyond me, but all that stuff just puts me to sleep. So I'm like literally doing push-ups to try to keep my blood sugar, like try to stay awake because I didn't want them to look over at me and see me like falling asleep at the wheel.
Well, maybe you need some math noise rock to go on because you get all the polyrhythmic math stuff in there, but it's so loud that it won't put you to sleep.
Nah, no,
No,
the loudness. Nah, I need a story. That's what it is, and that's like the music that I like is more storytelling, and that's what I'm trying to do myself too. Like write a good story that people want to hear about, and I'm still trying, still, and that's why I like even artists even of different genres that I don't necessarily like the genre, but I want to hear what they're talking about. I want to get it, and so for better or worse, that's just what gets me focused. Like I want to hear the story.
word, word.
Radio dictates what you hear. No, we're living. No, not here. Your brainwashed mind's full of stupid shit. Don't play it for me. I don't wanna hear it.
Let's see. We talked about Born to Be Wild in that '85 tour. Let's harness back in. So
Yeah,
you're saying you drink, you drive, you die was just supposed to be a demo?
well, what happened was I was in school. I was going to school at UC Berkeley and trying to learn how to ride motorcycles and stuff like that. And then and 10-foot pole was had been kind of on hiatus because we were kind of separated. Scott was playing baseball in the farm leagues and stuff at the time, I think. I don't remember exactly what level he was at, but he worked his way up through the minor leagues. And well, Scott was a pitcher on the White Sox, right?
Yeah.
So he got drafted right out of high school. So I went to school at UC Berkeley and he went to baseball school basically. And then but we got together, I think it was like on kind of a winter break, I remember falling asleep trying to I was trying to find a hotel. For some reason we recorded in San Diego, like Mystic Records, the Drink You Drive You Die album. For whatever reason, we just like suddenly we're recording, and I'm pretty sure it was in San Diego because I drove all the way from San Diego back to my folks' area in Simi Valley, and all the hotels were booked. It's kind of a weird thing. Like there was something about San Diego back in the day where maybe because of all the military bases that on the weekends or something, like all the hotels would be booked. And so I was literally falling asleep like 3 or 4 in the morning and getting off at every exit with my fiance at the time, which, we were kind of having, like, I was on vacation, wanted to like, I made her hang out with me at the recording studio all day. And I'm like trying to like, let's just go get a hotel and rest, and getting off at every exit because I'm falling asleep in every single hotel. Like even if the no vacancy sign wasn't on, you'd get there and be like, oh no, we don't have vacancy. And I'm like, why don't you turn your damn sign on? It's 4 in the morning and I saw you and like pulled in. You just wasted a lot of my time. And I drove all the way back to LA from San Diego. Like it'd be a 3-hour drive if I wasn't stopping at every hotel. But anyhow, so we went down there and we kind of like quickly threw down some tracks, and did some scratch vocals and like some tracks, like, okay, this is the basic idea. And then I didn't hear from him. And then I was at a record store in Berkeley, like I don't even remember, like a year or two later, like way down the line. And all of a sudden I see this record and it says, "You drink, you drive, you die, scared straight." And I'm just going like, what in the hell is this? And of course I bought it and I take it and I was so pissed. Well, one, I was pissed because just the title of it made us sound like we were like anti-drinking Nazis. Like you drink, you drive, you die. We're gonna kill you. It's like, and it was right at the time of the Nancy Reagan, like just say no and all that stuff. And it was just like, ew. Like I just didn't want to be associated with like, like I thought we were like for freedom and punk and stuff. Like, I mean, nobody wants drunk drivers to, go out and kill your family or whatever. But it just sounded like we were like this, hardcore straight edge band that was like gonna go out and smack the beer out of your hand. And which wasn't us, but it was, Mystic trying to market it to the straight. So Mystic was kind of famous for cheesy marketing schemes. So and also another cheesy thing in it was they had well, Scott had been in a car crash and it involved a drunk driver. So they had the cover is a picture of a crash he was in of like the wreckage, although it's a little kind of like the Trump audience pictures where they made cuts and then they change it to make it like look worse than it is because they took parts of the photo that you see twice as much wreckage as there really is. Like they did that with the audience at some of the things where like there's twice as many people. Oh wait, you see that line and that line. Like now you could do it with AI and you wouldn't know. You just like add more stuff. But back then you could kind of tell like, okay, there's that part of the car and then there's that part of the car again. They just wanted to have more like wreckage. Anyhow, but every time they mention it, like Scott Rudinski, a pitcher for the Chicago White Sox, da da da, and there's like a art with a hand with a baseball, like a pitching hand, and then it had a spiked wrist bracelet, like the punk rock, the punk baseball band. Anyhow, and the straight edge, like we're gonna try to appeal to the straight edge guys with it's called Scared Straight, so which is why we changed the name. So that's
Well,
eventually we
did
changed the name to
song-
10-Foot Pole.
It doesn't matter as long as it is dope. Grab that shit, man. You can't go. Come with the pain from all the things of the fucking mental strain. Skip it, I feel like an hour tea. Skip it, that means much more to me. Skip it, I feel like an hour tea. Skip it, that means much more to me.
Did have a song on there called Drug Free.
Yeah, which was written by Gary Roca, I think. I think he wrote the lyrics to that song, and he was the singer that Scott kicked out when we did the Nardcore album, and he was like the only 13-year-old kid I knew who did acid and stuff like that. So he had a song called Drug Free because he had been in so many like gnarly drug. So in the Scared Straight days, I didn't write that many lyrics yet. I can't remember what the percentage was, but maybe half of them or close to half. And in Scared Straight, there's this guy who was like he was in jail for robbing banks, and his name was actually Rob Demko, and I think he's passed away. And now I can't remember all the details, but I just remember on that first tour in 1985, I was doing sound for a huge 4th of July show, like 15,000 people at Devonshire Downs. It's Cal State Northridge now, but a football stadium on 4th of July. So I missed the first show and I flew out and met the band in Denver. But Rob, my buddy, I heard got super drunk after the show and be like, "You guys sucked without Dennis" on the first show. So anyway, so I'll say this for Rob. He was a stand-up guy other than apparently robbing a bank later on and going to prison. But he wrote a bunch of lyrics. He was a tortured soul and he had this whole he wrote a lot of lyrics and it kept him in this box, which he gave to Scott. And so I'm never sure of when Scott wrote songs, there were these lyrics that would just appear and I wasn't sure who wrote them. I was kind of curious, but so anyway, I think Gary Roca wrote the Drug Free song, but it could have been Rob. I'm not sure. It could have been Scott, but I never knew what stuff Scott really wrote because he wasn't kind of proud of that. It was kind of like a secret. He would just have fun with things and just kind of, he would pick random stuff and just, he was kind of like a very, very into spontaneous things, naming a song or something based on something silly, Flying V guitar or whatever. Here's the V song, whatever. And just kind of be real spontaneous. But where was I? I think Gary Roker wrote that song. Or it was known as Roca and was like a real hellion.
The pilot who steers the ship, don't get off the train. Are you afraid? I'm not.
And he liked the name Scared Straight because of the prison thing. He was actually the one who wanted to name the band Scared Straight. And it was more because of the prison movies, not because of Straight Edge, but because of like, oh yeah, these guys go to, these juvenile kids in juvie get like go to prison, and the prisoners yell at them like, you want to be cornholed? If you were here, I'd make you my bitch or whatever, try to scare them into leaving their life of crime, not heading down that path.
I was a troubled youth, and they sent me on 2 prison tours to try to do that to me.
Yeah.
It's real.
Did it work? Okay.
Oh, I never went to prison. I never got in any trouble outside of the high school, so
it worked. I mean, like, who knows? If you didn't do that, maybe you would have ended up, on the highway to hell, as they say. Well, I don't know, but I wasn't really. I was okay with the Scared Straight thing, but especially in the 90s when I started having some gay friends who were like, ooh, Scared Straight just sounds like, ooh, such a yucky band. Like, it just sounds like oh, cringy. And so then we decided to change it to 10-foot pole because it just sounded more fun. And Fat Mike was like, you guys need to, we made a record, which we called Swill eventually, but we made it as Scared Straight, and we tried to sell it to Fat Records and Epitaph Records to be on our label. So basically, with Scott's baseball money, he paid for the recording of Swill, and we made another record. That this was like 92 or something. By then, I was graduated from school, and I was living in Los Angeles doing running my dad's sound company. My dad had a sound company, but for him, it was just a side hustle. He was like, building Cold War stuff. Like he was like, cruise missiles and things like that. Like he was a engineer, like high level, gyroscopes and stuff of how cruise missiles would hit their target before they had GPS and things like that. And where was I? So I was living in LA, and Scott was playing baseball, but we worked together to like round up guys and like get the band, like rehearse these songs, write music, and make a record. So we made Swill, and we were all proud of it. And Fat Mike told us, he said a couple things. One is he said, some of these songs are good. I would put you on Fat Records only if you do an EP and I choose the best, whatever, 5 or 7 songs. And at the time we were kind of like proud of the record we just made. And we're like, no, we just made this whole thing. Like it's all made, like the package, the art, everything's ready. It'd be cool to be on Fat Records, but we didn't want to make that compromise. And in hindsight, he was actually right. Like when I look at Swill now, I kind of like, it was okay, but it wasn't like up to the level of where we want it to be. And but another thing he said is you guys should change your name because people think you're a straight edge band, and that's just not cool. And so we agreed with him on that, and we changed the name to 10-foot pole in that time frame, partially based on his, he was just one of the people saying, yeah, it's time. But and then eventually Brett from Epitaph called up a while later, a good chunk later, and said, hey, I like this record. Let's put it out on Epitaph. And at that point, we had already agreed with Mike. Like it just took us a couple months to kind of like get over ourselves on Swill. And so we said to Brett, like, we would love to be on Epitaph, but is there a way we can make a new record because we're kind of over Swill, and we'd like to like put our best foot forward on Epitaph? And he said, sure, like make a new record. And then that was Rev. Like Rev was like us going like, because we had also at that time heard the other stuff NoFX was doing, and heard like the Longest Line and stuff. Like that blew our minds. And like when we listened to the Longest Line and then we listened to Swill, we're kind of like, we're proud of Swill and like told some interesting stories and whatever. But it was like NoFX was like on fire, and we were like, we wanted to step up to like the big leagues, and so that's where Rev came from. And
So you notice that the city's changed. The open mirror roads now they seem so strange. Can you believe that there's paint on the walls? Kids are murdered in the high school halls. Wake up, kid, stop your whining. Every silver cloud
And again, Scott's playing baseball the whole time. So I'm, trying to write stuff. I'm working on like getting, keeping a band together. We got a drummer, Tony Palermo, and like, just training these guys and putting it all together and making it happen. And I wrote a lot of music because Scott was playing baseball. I even went to Chicago and wrote music there, like the song Old Man. I remember while I was in Chicago, like baseball games and stuff. Because one time Scott had stole my grandpa's shoelaces. We'd stayed at my grandpa's house before a show in San Francisco. And my grandma was like, did you take grandpa's shoelaces? There's like, we stayed in a room that had his shoes were in the closet, and it was Scott took his shoelaces. Anyhow, that's another story. But eventually, after Rev, we kicked Scott out, and that was basically because we all that work that I was doing to get the band going, the band was excited and going, and then Scott was going back and playing baseball, and we weren't sure if he would ever tour with us or whatever. And we were getting offers to like open for the Offspring, and when they were selling 7 million records, like huge tours. And we did this tour with NoFX and Face to Face, which was amazing. And so we were hooked. We were just like, we want to go. Like people love us. Like we should just do this. Like, and of course Scott was like, yeah, except I'm gonna go play baseball. And so eventually we were kind of like, we need to just like, make the call. And we decided to like kind of, move on. And we were trying to audition different singers and whatever. And we talked with Epitaph about it and said, hey, we want to like get a singer and like do this all the time, but we also don't want Scott to be bummed. So would you put out, if we did a record with Scott, but just called it a different name, or if Scott had other musicians or whatever, we want to offer that to Scott. Like, hey, we'd like to go on without you, but check this out. Your new band, we could even be your band, is already signed to Epitaph, and you could start a new career. And that basically was Pulley. So like basically Pulley was already signed to Epitaph, and that was like basically trying to give him like a peace offering. Like, we know you're going to be pissed because you'd like to do this, but we want to do it all the time. And, there was kind of a limit where I think we said, I can't remember what it was, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. It was some kind of thing. Like, can you commit that we could be a band for 2 weeks a year or 3 weeks a year? I can't remember. Like, we could at least go on tour 2 weeks a year. And he was like, I can't commit to that. And so we were like, well, I can't commit to 11 and a half months of keeping musicians ready for you and rehearsed and ready to go, and in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the smartest thing, because it kind of broke our audience in half. Like, half the people were like, oh, new singer, they suck now or whatever. But on the other hand, we were also able to tour and live our dream. And me, I eventually took over singing because I didn't want to have another singer who maybe also would decide later to not tour or quit the band or something. And since I wrote a lot of the lyrics and, most of the lyrics and like half the music, it just made sense for me to be the singer. So I just wanted to have more control in the future. I didn't ever want to be like, I want to be in a band, but my singer can't do it. So I just tried to learn how to sing.
Please let me take them. I don't want to be an idiot. Ritalin will make me smart. At least that's what my teacher said. All the other kids take them. Think I am the only one who needs something to slow me down. I talk too much 'cause I am dumb.
Word. And it turned out well because Unleashed was fucking badass.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
It was actually the first 10-foot pole album I acquired because, let's see, I was 16 at the time. I purchased Punkorama 3, right?
Mhm.
And ADD was on there, and I fucking loved that track and hunted down the album. Right?
That's our biggest song. Our biggest song on Spotify, as far as views, but like listens, is ADD. So that I'm still self-conscious about it because Rev is still super popular and a different crowd. Like, and it was 1994, so that was like kind of the height of, they say you love the music that you liked when you're 14 the most. Like, you'll always be nostalgic about it, and I get that. And a lot of people were like 14 in 94, like when the thing took off. So I'm still self-conscious about it. But yeah, ADD is technically the biggest song in terms of of plays, at least on Spotify. So that's cool. John's also on that record, one of my favorites, the song John.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of my favorites. John and following song, "It's Not Me," right? That like,
Oh, nice. You like that one?
yeah,
I
yeah, and they
I
flow
like that
well
one.
together too. They flow well together.
Yeah,
I love that album, man.
nice. I should relearn It's Not Me. I at the time I was a little I was irritated with my band members because I did a lot of writing, but I was mostly focused on the lyrics and the basic music. And it was supposed to be like, okay, I'm gonna focus on this stuff because I'm writing the lyrics for the whole album, and you guys write like the cool other stuff. And it always ended up that on my songs, uh on the songs that they wrote that they liked more, that they write these really gnarly intros and stuff. Like ADD has the guitar parts and the drum thing and like all these like stuff. And that's because Steve wrote the music. Of course, I wrote the lyrics and the melody and stuff, but Steve wrote the music, so he spent all that time like making a cool intro. And then It's Not Me, I wrote the music hoping the other guys would like make it cool and flashy, but then it just ended up being like nobody added anything to it. It was just what I wrote, and that's all. And so I was kind of like, well, I wonder if if we had put more like cool bells and whistles in it, maybe it could have been developed more. But and that was kind of a pattern. So now I try to write more intros and stuff, but it's still hard because most of my focus is on the lyrics and the story, and about half of it's on the music.
Now, see, I'm an album guy, right? And the way that those two songs flow together, like it just
Nice.
hit me right, and that's why I like both of those songs is because like it just
Yeah.
kind of flowed into the other one just right for me, you know?
Yeah. You can tell like I was into kind of some jerky guitar parts like Never Look Back was my kind of did it did it did it like I was just kind of like trying to make the guitar into kind of a percussive vehicle, and It's Not Me has some of that too, but then still the dun 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 dun, dun. Like it's just like powerful to me to play with that stuff. But I still wished people would write little like guitar hooks and things on my songs, but it rarely happened. Like if you want it done, you got to do it yourself. And I'm not a good enough guitarist to really like do the wild stuff.
Word, word. But yeah, I love that album. Uh, and
I had to make a choice, I made it. If I had another chance, I'd take it. I've gotta find a way to make a getaway.
your follow-up album that came out the next year, Insider, was great as well.
The Getaway. That one's my favorite video for sure. The video for The Getaway was Darren Doan. Darren Doan was supposed to do a video for some reason we didn't do a video on anything on Unleashed, which was a real shame. We should have done an ADD video, but we were supposed to do. So he did the video for Broken Bubble on Rev, and then he got paid to do another one, which I think was going to be Never Look Back, but it didn't happen. But because of baseball, of course. But because it didn't happen because of baseball, then everything just got shelved for a while. But he got paid for it already. So by the time Insider came out, he was like, "Oh, I really owe you guys because I got paid for this in 1994, 95. Insider came out in 99. So like he really felt bad about it. And I was like, so what the concept of the Getaway video was to have a uh, a spoof of an action film trailer that had so many different locations that people would like wonder if there really was a film. That was kind of the goal. And so even if it was just a little different location, it like it gave it more richness because it was also kind of a response to at the time a lot of videos were just like two camera shots in a rehearsal studio. Like I think Rancid had one like that or something where it's just literally them playing in a tiny room and the camera's just going around. It's just like, wow, this is incredibly boring. I want to do the opposite. And so with Darren, it was like we had scenes at the beach. We had people climbing buildings. We had a jacuzzi scene, sand on the beach, lifeguard scene. And it was just like, pull over the van, we'll do a thing here, we'll run through the bushes on the side of the freeway, or like all kinds of silly stuff. But with the goal of making it look like this is an actual film trailer. Like, the guy getting shot on the roof and falling into the pool, the alley fight scene. And then we had Brian Posen, who was a pal from we used to know some of the guys in Mr. Show and kind of go and we lived in I lived in Hollywood at the time, and some of the other guys did too. And we'd go support the Mr. Show thing. Not me so much, but and it was kind of like a pot smoking club. There were a couple of our guys who were like really like partying and worked in bars and stuff like that. And so they kind of developed these networks of people like Brian Posen that were just like genius comedy writers. And so he ended up doing the intro for us, where for people who haven't seen it, he's like playing with a little toy racing thing while there's like kind of races going on. He's watching this video and emotionally reacting to the parts in the video. And for people who don't know, he's the comedian who's in like Just Shoot Me and a bunch of other things. Like you'll if you watch The Getaway, you'll kind of probably recognize him instantly. But like all these things went into one silly punk rock video, and that I was proud of that one. I still am.
Word.
One hero, one vision. Your word and mine, religion. No regrets, not hollow. You go and I follow.
So let's jump back into this this bad mother trucker. That was a great release.
Oh, great. It was that was a tricky one because it was our first one off of Epitaph, and we also tried a different producer, and it was kind of a different process, and it wasn't as well received, but it's hard to say like also whether it had to do with not being on Epitaph Records. Like we weren't able to market it to our fan base, basically. Like Victory Records had a whole different fan base, and so like the standard things that they would do to announce an album. I mean, I'm not really sure. There's so many different factors, but years later we had people that were like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys put out a record," and I just felt like if it had been on Epitaph Records, it would have reached all the people who liked the previous albums. So it was really disappointing. And there's a long story to that too, but it was unfortunate. And so being on so because of that, it just kind of it wasn't my favorite record, but we actually we haven't announced this yet, so this will be kind of a thing just for you guys. Hopefully, like don't make a big announcement about it, but just it's so we're doing a kind of like a Taylor's version of Bad Mother Trucker, and not because I wanted to, because it's not my favorite record, but in the process of doing it, I've actually really enjoyed returning to some of these songs. Like we always felt like the album didn't sound as good as it should have. It was like recorded kind of differently, and there were things going on that were just kind of like a distraction from just making a good record. And but most importantly, our current record label owner, it's his favorite record. His name's Anthony, and he's like the guy behind People of Punk Rock Records, and lives just outside of Quebec City. And he just loves this record, and he's been kind of an angel investor. Like when times were really rough, he and some other people in that area that were really into punk rock. For some reason, that area, Quebec City, like their culture is just embraced the 90s skate punk. Like they never forgot it, where the rest of the world kind of moved on. And sometimes people come back or whatever, but they've just like, they train their kids, like their kids know all the songs and stuff. It's amazing. And but he's been a huge supporter, coming on tour with us and selling merch, and just he's really into this stuff, really into the art and everything and quality. Like he also does merch for other bands and stuff, like does it like being a merch manager, not like physically making it, but deciding which stuff to do. In fact, recently I was up there, so I did a short tour with Joey Cape doing solo acoustic stuff, and Lagwagon had been playing at a festival that one of my friends up there was putting on this festival. And so Anthony was selling merchandise for Millencolin and whatnot. And I went in with Anthony that day. It was like this totally rainy day. and I was slinging merch for Millencolin, and it ended up being that was their biggest ever merch day, like their most merch sales in their whole career, like in decades. And it's all because Anthony is so like made sure like every shirt design was there and available, the sizes, and it looked great, like all this stuff. And I'm there like, and they're speaking in Quebecois version of French to me, and I'm just, but they're also like, aren't you in 10-foot pole? And I'm like, yeah, but today I'm Millencolin's, just selling Millencolin stuff. But anyhow, Bad Mother Trucker is Anthony's favorite 10-foot pole record, and he wanted to do a re-recording of it. He was interested in doing it, and so it's not what I wanted to focus on, but I just felt like we owed him so much, we like had to do it. So it's in process right now. Like it's basically in the mixing process. Our guitarist Scott Hallquist is mixing and producing it, and did like almost all the guitars on it. I didn't do any guitars. I just sang on it because I didn't even want to do it. But I was just kind of like, well, I'll sing. And Scott's like, I'll play the guitar, so it'll be easy for you. Because what I was worried was that working on that would keep me from writing music for the new, brand new song 10-foot pole album. And I want to do an acoustic record too. Like there's so many things that I'm trying to do, but not enough time in the day. And so anyhow, it's so far it's like sounding really cool. I'm excited to hear the mixes and like, I mean, he mapped out the time to be like the same drum time and stuff. Like it's going to be very close to the original. Hopefully just sound better and like a little, not like like a revisited, like, so on set list, we changed some songs and stuff to like kind of like take a more like open, but this is more like a, Taylor's version where it's like, it's just the same song, even the same timing, but re-recorded. And, anyhow, it's a gift to Anthony of people of punk rock records. So I hope people like it.
Word. And it was a great album, so I'm looking forward to it,
I was kicked out of kindergarten, kicked out of kindergarten, kicked out of kindergarten, kicked out of kindergarten.
And Subliminal Messages was a great album as well. Like, I don't understand how people wouldn't have noticed those two releases, you say.
Well, I mean, a lot of stuff has to do with marketing. A lot of stuff just has to do with like, can you get the word out? And so I'll try to do a condensed version is Victory Records was pretty supportive of Bad Mother Trucker, but they didn't have access to the same audience as the Epitaph audience. Like they didn't have the mailing lists and all the things, like the people that they advertised to didn't reach the same people. I think at least that's part of it. And then we had some issues with the owner of the record label at the time, who wanted to be the Al Capone of punk rock labels. And so on the next record, he suddenly changed his mind because he wanted to force us to use artwork that we didn't like. And I already told you about the Mystic Records, like You Drink, You Drive, You Die fiasco. So we were very sensitive about a label telling us what to do. And I was kind of like, well, that's kind of a cool idea. Let's see what the artist, it basically was a sketch written on a napkin. And he was like, I've got your artwork. You're going to love it. It's this. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure about that, but well, let's see the final version. And he's like, well, no, that's it. Like the sketch on that, that's what it should be. And we're kind of like, well, it got to kind of get the band to like vote on it or something. And he was just like, am I allowed to swear in here? He was just like,
Yeah.
Well, then fuck you guys. You're off of the label. That's literally, actually, he didn't say you're off the label. He didn't let us know for sure. He just said, then fuck you guys. And that was it. Like he kind of ghosted us. And it was kind of like, does that mean we're free to go somewhere else? Like, so there was this limbo where we were on the label, but I had already committed to recording Subliminal Messages. And I actually put my own money down to, because they didn't give us. So in the middle of that, anyhow, we had this plan where we already had this huge Europe tour committed, and we were trying to get the record done before our touring. And we had Ryan Green committed to a time frame. And then and then was asking, the label, hey, can you put this deposit down for this recording studio? And they were like, oh no, it's not in the budget for this month. I'm like, okay. So I put it on my credit card. Then the next month we're like, hey, can you do the recording? Oh, it's not in the budget again. And then came that thing with the cover. So what ended up happening with Subliminal Messages was I paid for a whole album unexpectedly, and then eventually Go-Kart Records picked it up only because I still had these tours lined up, and we were just trying to get somebody who would make the records so we could sell them on tour. Like even if the advertising wasn't all done, Go-Kart Records kind of got it out there. I don't know how much money he spent on the marketing. I have no idea. I was just grateful to have anything, to have any support. But still, so then we went from Epitaph to Victory to Go-Kart. Same thing. Like, how does Go-Kart reach all the Epitaph lovers? How does it happen? And it wasn't like it is now with the internet, where like something happens in punk rock and everybody knows about it. Like back in those days, it wasn't as connected. We weren't like, everyone wasn't aware of things right away. It was more word of mouth, or you know, through zines and other things like that. Like, is it on the Tony Hawk, compilation or not? If it's not on, I mean, a huge amount of coverage we got was from people buying hearing us on the Epitaph compilations, the Summer Nationals or whatever it was called, Punkorama. That was it. We were on Punkorama, and we were on a few big compilations, a few big video games and stuff. Without that, how do people know we have a new record? And so Subliminal Messages didn't get kind of that push. And also I made the mistake of starting it with a weird song. The Wake Up and Smell the Fascism was kind of like very like metal-ish. And if we would have started with Kicked Out of Kindergarten or something, people would have been like, oh yeah, another skate punk song. But instead it was kind of like, oh, what's this? Something different. And we were trying to stretch, but I just liked it so much. I thought this is an awesome, beginning of an album. But I wasn't really thinking too much of like our fan base. Like, how does that song define, like how people perceive it? And also there were some like George Bush, quote kind of things there. And so there were some people who are like, oh, they're getting all political, da da da. And I was like, it's not really like, if you listen to the lyrics, I mean, there's one song that's like Wake Up and Smell the Fascism, but it wasn't like the whole record. It wasn't like we suddenly turned into a political band at all. It was more like a little bit of a few comments here and there,
and during the time, everyone was throwing in a little bit of politics. I mean,
yeah, I would have been happy to discuss it more or something, but I also want to have the freedom of just writing songs that I like, not like, like a propaganda or something where people expect it to be all about that thing, or, I mean, that's why I was in punk rock, was to have the freedom to write whatever I want, whether it's about getting kicked out of kindergarten or how there's fascism creeping into all these aspects of our lives.
Which is even more relevant now, 20 years later.
Yeah, was I wrong? No. But anyway, but so one, Subliminal Messages wasn't marketed properly, and two, even the people who did hear it, they might have been turned off for those reasons. And yeah.
We're stuck here in the long night, hoping to see daylight, hanging on to what's right, trying to push on through. We're building up a new way, getting closer each day. Not everything is okay, but it's the best that we can do.
I was going to say, like, as far as the sequencing of the album, I think that makes a big difference. And there's another record, Escalating Quickly, which I think was hurt a lot by the sequencing. I let our producer kind of have his say in it, and he very strongly believed in this sequencing. And I think he was wrong. Escalating Quickly starts off with kind of a punkish song, and then it has two kind of mid-tempo songs in a row, and some keyboard part and stuff on it. And people just were like pissed, like, oh, 10-foot poles turned into a keyboard band. Whatever. I mean, it has tons of guitar too, but I think that having the first three songs not be like super banger, like mid tempo, and then I can't remember exactly. I'm not even sure I'm stating it correctly, but so Don't Be a Dick, which I think is super catchy and whatever, but it is pretty slow. And then it's followed right away with Numb, which has these kind of like weird keyboard sounding things in it. And Numb was a great song. Like when I was playing it acoustically, people loved singing it because I'd be like, Numb, Numb. You know, people are singing along and it was fun. But that version of it with the keys and stuff, it shouldn't have been in the beginning of the record. It should have been like 7 songs in after people already heard like the punk that they wanted to hear. And then like, oh, trippy, here's a funny sounding song, you know? But anyway, Ryan was like, no, we got to put the strong stuff up forward. And like, this is such a great song. People are going to love it. I'm like, yeah. Anyhow.
So that's how you feel about Escalating Quickly, huh? Now, see, it was a great album, but I do agree with you that you do need, it can't just be some mid-tempo stuff right there at the beginning. You got to drive them in and be like, we are a punk band, and here's some other stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my feeling was we are a punk band, therefore I reserve the right to do whatever the hell I want. And this is an experimental record. We're gonna have like the basic ideas were like I wanted to have a bunch of stuff like Thin Lizzy with like 2 guitar parts doing like crazy stuff all the time, like Dan Palmer just playing goofy stuff through the whole thing. And Ryan was like, yeah, let's put some keyboards in. I'm like, yeah, you know, knock yourself out. I was basically trying to relinquish some control because I didn't want all the records to kind of sound the same. Like if I keep writing the same kind of songs all the time, it gets boring. And so I was kind of like, you know, it's Ryan Green. Like, what could go wrong? Like, it'll be awesome. Like, bring in these monster players. Like, the band had been on hiatus for a long time, and so we didn't even have like a full time drummer at that time. So Ryan was like, well, let's work with Sean and Sean Sellers, and it was great. Like he's, you know, he was kind of a friend of the band, not close, but close enough. And he had just worked with Ryan on something else, and so it was kind of like I could turn over a lot of the development of the record to Ryan and still have confidence that it was going to be a professional sounding record. Cause I was super busy doing my audio work. Like at the time I was like touring with bands. I was gone a lot doing sound for Jimmy Eat World. I did 500 Jimmy Eat World shows as their front of house sound engineer, 500. So, you know, like when Ryan sent me the mixes, I was literally on a tour listening on headphones in the airport one time. I remember listening to mixes, and headphones aren't actually a good, neutral way to hear something. Like the headphones kind of distort, like what, you know, where's the levels and things. But I just fully trusted Ryan and we did it. And I'm proud of it, but I think a few little tweaks would have kind of, you know, just changing the presentation, put some fast stuff right up front and people be like, yeah, I think we put one of the fastest songs near the end, like, good, that one, I just, now I'm having a brain fart, but, like one of the fastest songs is near the end of the record and it should have been like right up front for the old fans to just like get in the mood first before I let a song fly in there with keyboards.
Right, but it did have some great tracks on it. It was pretty good. And it was a great release. I mean, Setlist set me up for I was excited when Setlist came out because it's like, holy shit, there's some 10-foot pole again. And Escalating Quickly was a great release, you know.
I'm glad you liked it. One cool thing about Escalating Quickly is it gave me the confidence to produce my own thing. Because up to that point, like me and Ryan or me and other producers over the years would have things like we'd have a disagreement about something and Ryan would always pull the, you know, like, you know, had all these, you know, a lot of successful in the genre records, like iconic records, like No Effects, you know, huge albums. And, you know, he'd say things, oh yeah, you could do it. You could do it that way if you want your record to suck. You know, he would say things like that. And you know, we'd joke around about it, but you know, he would be very confident in his things. And after that, because of like what I just said about the sequencing, I was like, no, I'm going to stand up for my views a little stronger or at least try them. And so, we did,
Can we put down the knives? I will never give in. If I fall, we will
pandemic, I did the acoustic record, which was my first album of mixing and producing. So me as a sound engineer doing all these concerts, I like finally had the time to just sit and work on like learning how to make a record and not feeling pressured because there was a pandemic, like there was nothing else that could happen. And there was no point in me like learning how to use live soundboard, like studying that stuff because it would be years before I would actually be mixing concerts again. So it was a way for me to stay in mixing and music and keep my mind occupied and be creating something that I'm proud of and trying something new. So that was my first album of me making and I thought one, I was hugely proud of it. It turned out great, I thought. And two, it got a good response. People liked it. And when I say I made it, like I mean I made like from the demos, like all the drum parts, all the like I did bring in other people, like Dan Palmer played a lot of guitar parts and like amazing cool guitar parts and the bass player Richie and my drummer Guillaume, I had no idea he had such a beautiful voice. We'd never had him singing before. He's not a very loud singer. So in the rock shows, having a singing drummer is really hard because you get a lot of drum bleed and stuff, and sometimes it sounds terrible. But he has like a boy band voice, like really smooth sounding vocal, and so that stuff just made the record. It was awesome. I'm super proud of it. And then that gave me and people liked it, so that gave me the confidence to try to do Winning, the album that became Winning. And and all the while being like, well, if worse comes to worse, if my mixing isn't up to par, I can always just send it to someone else to mix it, like see how it goes. But of course I was like, but I want to do it myself. I want to like see if I can, get it up there. And there were things I would change about the mixes and stuff, but like the producing decisions, like all the little, how long should this guitar solo go? Where should this go? Should there be a bridge here? How should I write the bridge? Like all that stuff was like decisions I made and then got a lot of positive feedback for it. So I was kind of really proud of that and had a lot more confidence in that. If I like it, a lot of other people are going to like it too. Which before producers will be like, well, you don't, the artist's judgment is often like, whatever, you don't know which is your best song. Or I mean, that's traditionally true that like people don't know what their hit song is sometimes, when Prince had put out a record with like 60 songs on it. But if somebody else took their favorite 12, it might actually do better because there's not 60 songs diluting the, but at least in that case, I felt like, the decisions I made were worked out well with our audience. Like our audience likes the people who listen to it. And there's still people who don't want to hear anything new. Like they're fans of the band, but it's got to be from the 90s. But the people who listen to it for the most part were pretty stoked. And when we played live, they already knew the new songs, which didn't happen like on Insider. Like when we played The Getaway, we thought people would just go nuts. And the first time we played it, people were just kind of looking at us like, oh, it's, whatever. It wasn't until a couple years later when people had heard it a whole bunch more times that they're like, that's the greatest song ever. Like a few people, and, we right off the bat, we're like, oh, wow, this song's not going over well. Like we thought people would love it. But it's a question of like getting used to it. Like how many times do they listen to it? Word. And so far in Winning, it's been up, like surprised us with like people singing along, like It's Always Been You or whatever. And so that was that felt good. A little pat on the back.
Yeah, Winning is a great album. I've been rocking that quite a bit.
Oh, nice. There was one thing like, so I did the mix on that. And then right after that, this like tube saturation plugin came out. And then I put it on the mix, but it had already been like the album was already out. And then I tweaked it a little and all of a sudden like the guitar and drums came more into focus. And I was like, oh shit, if I had just had this like 4 weeks ago. It's so weird how like little things like on Winning, like to me, the drums are a little bit too prominent and just like the guitars and stuff need to be just a little more there. And like, I can't change it now. Like it's done.
Why did you even try to add it in afterwards? Right.
Because it was a new plugin. And I was like, I wonder what this would do because and it really like, it added definition. Like saturation's a weird thing. Like it's basically like, like distortion. It's like turning it up by making it more intense. I don't know how, the harmonics of it, I guess. But it did something to the clarity of the parts that I was trying to get clarity on without wrecking the vocal and stuff. Like they weren't fighting, but all of a sudden the guitars were like, I was like, oh, I wish I had that 4 weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's
Well,
always like that, but it was my first rock record ever, like me mixing and producing them. So I'm proud.
We are defenders, a torch in our hands, a flame that we touch to the stealers of lands. We will never retreat. Daily tyrants arise.
I don't want to be
and it
recording.
did turn out great. And that just means that the next one's going to be even better, right?
Maybe if I have the time and patience to do it. I mean, it takes me a lot longer to make a record than somebody who does it for a living. Like I'm just like, like I understand the concepts, but it's it's a painstaking process if you don't do it a lot. Like if you do it a lot, you're like flying around. Actually, the most successful producers these days usually have a bunch of interns working for them who do a lot of like editing and stuff, like really monotonous work, but they're kind of like paying their dues to try to go up the chain. Whereas I was doing a lot of the monotonous work myself, and it's monotonous, like little edits you do to like, take the noise out of just simple things like in the tom mic, rather than using a gate, you like clip all the quiet period, like stuff, you're like
Yeah.
editing out stuff or whatever, like a lot of editing basically. And it's that part's not fun. It's not creative and exciting, but it makes the thing cleaner in the long run.
Word. There's a there's a I use Audacity sometimes, and there's a nice little feature on that will go through and you take a sample of the moments that are supposed to be quiet, and it finds out what kind of noise is there, and then it'll go through and take that noise out of the whole mix.
Neat.
Yeah, but
I'm sure there's ways to automate it. If I did it more, I would have it figured out, especially now with AI. Like, it's like there's stuff that could be done, I'm sure. But, to do that well, you have to spend time on it. And right now, I need to be spending my time being creative, not learning how to edit audio. Like otherwise, like I don't know how many albums I have left in me. If I focus on being creative, maybe a few. If I focus on editing, maybe none. Like how many years are left? I don't know.
word.